Happy Wednesday, everyone. Got a bit confused then for some reason. I don't know why. Uh, Very excited to have you all here today because I'm here with Manav for a Tailwind intro. And I've seen what Manav is going to demo with Tailwind for us. Looking very exciting indeed. We're going to talk a bit about why to use Tailwind, how much CSS you need to know, how much CSS is actually available in Tailwind, how to get started with it, and what are the pros and cons. Yes, so looking forward to that. And of course, Manav's awesome demo of just how easy Tailwind is to use. I've seen it before and I really liked it actually. So really looking forward to this. Thanks for joining us, Manav.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Great to be here and ready to get started. Letting everyone know about Tailwind for sure.
Brilliant. Yeah, let's start off with why use Tailwind as opposed to just plain or vanilla CSS.
Sure, absolutely. So we can write vanilla CSS, and Tailwind doesn't restrict us from doing that. But I don't know if you really like jumping back and forth between your HTML and your CSS file constantly. I don't like that. And then I've got to grab all of these individual selectors, open up the braces, put the rule, colon, semicolons. It's a lot of I mean, CSS is fine, but the overall, I guess, syntax sometimes gets a little bit tedious for me. And that's one of the motivations for using something like Tailwind, as opposed to doing everything just in plain Jane CSS.
Yeah, so you'll see in a minute that Tailwind is all in the HTML file, if I'm not mistaken, Manav.
It mostly is. However, we have the capability of jumping into our CSS. And if we get to it, depending on how far we get in the demo, we will see some good use cases where we don't necessarily want to load everything in the HTML, although we certainly can just to get started.
Awesome. Yes, because I think we've all been there scrolling through our CSS, finding the right rule and all the rest of it. It can get pretty complicated. Before we go to the demo, one burning question I have is, do you need to know much CSS to use Tailwind?
I would say yes. You can't come into Tailwind not knowing CSS. I mean, I don't know, much is, of course, relative. But the way that CSS works is it doesn't do, unlike some other things like Bootstrap or Bulma, where you just grab the class, pop it in, and it does like 8 things and magically just happens. With Tailwind, you have full creative control, which means that you're going to need to know what rules you want to use and then just apply the correct Tailwind. So if you don't know, for instance, what flexbox is or padding or what it means, well, I guess like text center, that one's pretty straightforward. But yeah, you probably need to know the basics of CSS in terms of especially flexbox and margin, padding, those types of things. So you don't need to be a specialist or a guru, but the basics would definitely be a good idea.
Yeah, interesting to hear you say you have full creative control, because I think some people worry that, oh, if I use a CSS framework like Tailwind or any of the others, it's going to look similar to a lot of other websites on the web. But it sounds like you can customize it nicely, which is very
That
good.
is 100% accurate. And just to give a little personal experience with it, I've done a lot of like freelance stuff, like around 2015 when the whole responsive web design thing was, somewhere around there. And I didn't really understand how to do it in CSS. And I discovered, Bootstrap. Like, oh, this is super simple with Bootstrap. And I used Bootstrap for several years, and I still have a lot of respect for Bootstrap. In fact, if you need to spin something up at the last minute, and you have like an hour and you don't have a lot of customization, you're probably better off using Bootstrap if it's like an 11th hour thing. But I used that for a while. Well, here's what happened. I ended up getting to a spot where I needed more and more customization. And that's when I started fighting with Bootstrap, trying to overwrite it. Same thing, I tried Bulma, and then I discovered Tailwind. And that's why the whole full creative control, 100% true with Tailwind. I am never fighting against Tailwind because these are all just micro utility classes. It's totally up to me which ones I sprinkle in and when I sprinkle them in. So it's full creative control for sure.
Sounds excellent. Got some people in the chat excited about Tailwind. Sid Toast, love Tailwind CSS. Ooh.
Nice.
And
You and me
Mika
both.
is excited to learn about Tailwind too. And we have Lacho here. I'm bringing this up because Lacho is our brand new, well, one of them, bootcamp student. Yes, if you're wondering what I'm on about, Scrimba has a bootcamp. Here it is, led by Gil, our wonderful teacher. And yes, it's a immersive learning experience where you meet a group of like-minded students, then you get calls with teacher assistance, help with looking for a job, and all the rest of it. So go and check out this link if you would like.
Oh, absolutely. I had to give one special shout out to Gil. You mentioned Gil. So even before there was Scrimba, I mentioned like 2014, 2015. Gil, through another platform back in the day, is the one that actually taught me CSS, I would say. So
Really?
the reason I'm working in CSS is due in large part due to what Gil showed, what I learned from Gil like many years ago.
Wow, there you go. What a story. Brilliant. Okay, I won't hold us anymore from your demo, Manav, so I'm ready to share your screen when you give me the nod.
Yeah, I've got it ready to go. I've got a few tabs open. We'll take an overview of kind of what Tailwind is, and then we'll use the very convenient Tailwind playground. I did have that link. If by chance somebody wants to follow along in real time, I don't know. Some people like to do that, or otherwise, of course, we'll share the more finished version depending on how far we get.
So there's a link in the chat for you to check out.
Yeah,
so yeah, take it away.
Okay, awesome. Yeah, so just, on the front page here of Tailwind, it kind of says it all. And this is what I was mentioning. In a nutshell, you get all these micro classes. So you get this class called Flex. If you know the basics of CSS, you know that that's probably going to be display flex. The beauty of it is I don't need to go to a CSS file, write a selector, braces, display, flex. If I want to use flex, I'm just going to throw flex in my classes here. Now, these demos on here are definitely worth looking at. I encourage you to take a look at them. They are a little bit, they kind of jump right into the thick of things, so maybe a little bit overwhelming. You're not sure what you're looking at. And but there are a lot of really nice, simple demos here, and they look really, really interesting. And this gives you an idea just from a high level how customizable it is. These are all done and with exactly the code that you see in here, and there's no additional like CSS. And these aren't interactive. There's no JavaScript. It's just the static CSS. So there's a lot of great great examples right in here. With that, we're going to open up the Tailwind playground, and this is not a very great example. It's just bare bones HTML. So what we should, I should also show before we do that, how do we get started with Tailwind? So there's a couple of ways. What we're doing is using the Tailwind playground, which is great for playing with Tailwind. But the easiest way in terms of a browser, and you can do this right on Scrimba. In fact, we probably should mention I'm finishing up a Scrimba course on Tailwind, and where we just keep it simple and use the CDN. So there is a CDN where you can pop this into a Scrim or wherever, and you can use it on the fly. This is actually, I guess, a little bit simpler example. We can see here that we have an H1, and then we're increasing the text size. We're making the font bold, and we want it to be underlined, for instance. So it's as simple as dropping in the CDN. What I like to do is I go through, I have a template repo, and we have that link if anybody would like to see that for later on. It's an opinionated GitHub template repo. It has a lot of other things in it, a Vite bundler and stuff, but it has Tailwind pre-configured. But if you're into, NPM and you know the basics of NPM, you can quickly install it and get it up and running. So definitely we can look at that if there's time at the end, or I'm happy to answer questions, later after the fact, if we can get those questions. So without further ado, let's jump into using this thing. So before we look at the HTML, let's take a look at the CSS file. So this is interesting. And this is essentially once you install Tailwind into your project, it actually gives you access to a lot of Tailwind directives, excuse me. So you might be looking at this isn't real CSS, and you're absolutely right. These are the Tailwind directives that actually give us access to all of the Tailwind classes that we need. By the way, I should also say, some people sometimes get concerned, well, I'm going to ship off all of the CSS that I'm not using. Not accurate. As part of the bundling process, when you ship to production, it's going to strip down everything to just the pieces that you are really using in your HTML. Because people look at that and they say, oh, this is so much bloat. Not exactly. It is in development, but not when you ship to production. But we're not ready to do all that yet. I just wanted to show you the bare bones CSS file is going to have these three things in it. And this low, and then we can actually see the generated CSS down here, and it shows us all the base classes component. Well, we don't actually have our own component, so you just load all the CSS base rules. So you might look at this and say, wow, this is super plain Jane, and that's exactly the point. The first thing Tailwind does is it gives us a really nice sort of hard reset. Some people, you may be familiar with normalize. It kind of does the same thing. So we're starting off in all of the browsers on a baseline. So what we see in one browser can work consistently. So those are a few things to be aware of, why you might see these things in a CSS file. What are we going to be what are we going to be making? I figured we will make. I have this little silly demo of just a basic landing page on that I launched on Netlify, and I figured we would go kind of mobile first and see how far we get with something like this. I'm not going to try to match this, but something like this, just like a header, little hero section, some of these things. So the HTML that's in here kind of correlates with this thing that we're trying to build. All right, so if we look at the top, we have this header element. It's got kind of this indigo color here. Let's get started with that. So I'm going to go in here to header, and I'm going to open up a class, and I'm going to say, what's cool about the playground, and there is a VS Code extension, which gives you the same. You get this great auto completion, so you can really see up front what you're looking at. But let's say you've never used Tailwind before. What are some of the background colors? The documentation is absolutely great. I'm already in the docs. I'll just go in here and I'll search. So I won't search like every class. I just want to give you an idea of how the background works. So if I want to, let's look for color actually. And there we go, background color. For some reason, it doesn't come up with, it doesn't come up when you look for background, only color. So we get this really nice palette of colors, and we just have to throw in these classes like we see here. Now, in case you're wondering, well, what if I don't like these colors? I'm doing an agency design with very specific brand colors. That's not a problem at all either. On every single page, they talk about how you customize your theme. So you can pop into the Tailwind config file, which in the playground is right here, and you can add your own custom color, and it'll take your configuration, throw it in there, and that's a color you can use. In fact, we can, just because it's so easy to do, let's just do that right now. I wasn't planning on doing that, but let's just pop this in. I now have created my own class called Regal-Blue with this specific color. So if I come in here and say BG Regal, there it is. This is not in the Tailwind docs. We just created that custom class for our special needs here. That's what that was all about. Okay, I'm going to take that out because I didn't really want, it's really too dark. So I'm going to go with my original idea of like indigo 500. Let's add some padding. We'll go PY. And you might even notice this class is very common even in Bootstrap and Bulma. So I'll say like PY-4. We're going to work on this H1. We're going to get it centered. So text-center. And as we type these classes, I want to make the point that these are not magic. You hover over this, and it shows you exactly what it's doing. So again, this is what I mean by full creative control. It's as if you're writing your own CSS without writing your own CSS.
Nice.
So text center. Let's do we'll do the text color. Just make that white. We want that to stand out more. We can do text 3XL. And we can make the font like, really super heavy. That's too heavy. Maybe just bold, something like that. Okay. So again, I mean, we don't have time to do a lot of customization, but, happy to talk about that. You can bring in your own fonts. You can set your own colors. You can create your own custom utility classes on the fly. Notice with that regal blue, I took it out now. I just popped that in, and that's actually available as BG-regal-blue or text-regal-blue. So you can tell it what you want the name to be, and it'll automatically map it to using the same system that's in Tailwind. That's what I mean by full creative control.
Nice.
Okay, so the header is basically done. Let's actually shrink this down a little bit to make it a little bit more like mobile. Okay, so we've got this call to action piece in here, kind of like this stuff in here. For the background image, I'm just going to use Lorem Pixum. It's just a nice site where you just pop this link in and just gives you a random image. So for this part, since it's a one-off image, I'm just going to go ahead and pop it in as a inline style. You could put it in some CSS, but if it's a one-off thing, yeah, I know inline styles are bad. I really don't use them, except for a one-off background image. It works just fine. I'm still going to use, I'm going to say, background dash image, and then just like you would do, this is regular CSS here for just a minute. Pop that in. And then there we go. We can kind of see this start to come in. Let's make it a little bit bigger, though, like maybe 500. Okay, so actually, no, I'm going to bring that back because I want to take care of this repeating. You see, it has this annoying repeating business. Let's take care of that right now. So I want to make it intentionally smaller so you can see that annoying feature of CSS, which just defaults to making everything look like tiles. So on here, I'll say BG no repeat, done. So now it's on no repeat, but that's not going to work because I still need it to be like, a lot bigger and stuff, right? So then I'm going to say BG, BG cover? Yeah, BG cover. So again, any of these things, and I'll probably forget some of these, so I'll jump into the docs when I do, but just to give another example. Oh, I forgot. How do we do background size? Just start typing back. There you go. The documentation is amazing. Like that's it. Those are the 3 built-in things you can do. And then it gives you, some examples here. I guess we can also say BG center to center that background image. Okay, so now that it's really low grain, so I will go ahead and bump it up now to like 500, so it's not as grainy. It's still pretty grainy. So let me just make it bigger, just so it looks a little bit better. Okay, now we gotta do some work just overall in the this section here with the call to action rather. So let's go ahead and start using some flex in here, but we also need some minimum height and some padding in here. So to make this look like a hero, I'm going to say PY-24 to kind of give us that look. Again, if I hover over this, it tells me what this is doing in rems. That's what the padding is. Okay. So PY-24 is good. Or whatever, 32 if you want to make it bigger, whatever you want. There's a lot of pre-built ones. And as I already showed you, you can if you have a very particular padding or something you want to do, you can drop it into the config and it'll be available. Oh, you can, we're not doing that here, but you can actually do like the scroll snap padding, but that's a little bit advanced. So folks may not be familiar with that, but hopefully most of these rules are pretty familiar to folks. Font size, text color, BG. And again, I don't have to jump into the CSS to do any of this. All right, so now that that's there, we got to do a little bit more work on our section here. This is going to be a great spot to do like a flex box and kind of stack things up. Say class flex. But we're not going to, it's just going to put everybody in a row. As you may already know with Flexbox, the first thing it does is it takes the immediate children and just lines them up in a row. They're like, hey, children, line up. And they line up. Except we don't want them in a row. We want them in a column. So children line up in a column. Now they're in a column. It still is pretty hard to see what's going on with the image. So I'd like to bring in kind of this look with a little background, kind of translucent, dark, and maybe some rounded corners. So let's go ahead and take care of that. We'll add some padding here again, like maybe PY-8 and maybe PX-4. And now let's bring in the BG black, but that's no good. I don't want black. I want it to be like 50% black. All we have to do, well, finish off BG black. You put a slash and you have all these other choices in here built in. So in real time, I can kind of see, I'll just put it like at 40. Since we have a dark background, we probably want white text. Oops. White text. Okay, there we go. So again, I want to call this out here. All of the colors, you can do slash, and it goes in increments of 5, I think. So you can have really quick and easy control of the opacity. If I was doing in the CSS, I'd have to do, well, I could do RGBA or something, I guess. But this is less typing. So
yeah, I really like the how Tailwind works with colors. It's so easy to see the different options you've got and try different things out.
It is
very
like a
handy
choice. Yeah, I absolutely love it. So yeah, I'll keep an eye on the time here. It's flying by quickly. So let's see. Okay, so we have this flex column. Okay, so a lot of times whenever you have these inputs, you need to have the label for accessibility purposes, right? This has nothing to do with Tailwind. This is for HTML. As you may already know, every input should have a for matching with an ID. So we've got that, but a lot of times we don't want to actually show the label. We need it there for accessibility. We don't want to show it. So there's a very convenient class called SR only, screen reader only. And when we hover over it, this particular rule, no, it's not. Oh, I need to put a space in here maybe. There it goes. This particular rule is complex. And this is just based upon years of trial and error. This is supposed to be like the best collection of CSS rules to make this fully accessible and still not show it. So anyway, this is definitely a spot where this is like the only spot in Tailwind where it does like a whole bunch of stuff. But ultimately, it's still doing one thing, screen reader only.
Oh, wow.
Yep, we took care of that. And now I want to get this centered and stacked and all that. So going back here, I'm going to say, I always forget which way this goes. So I just try one. And there we go. I forget which is align items, which is justify. I'll never learn which one is which.
Yes, so do I. I just try them both. And...
I know technically it's like the main axis or whatever. Anyway, we've got that. I need some gap in here. How about gap dash Y? Oops. Gap dash Y dash 4. That'll give it a little bit of gap. And now in my form, I'm going to do kind of the same thing here. Class equals flex call, gap dash Y dash 4. There's that. Okay. Now I'm going to hit this tidy button and it kind of sorts the classes a little bit better. All right. So in here, let me do this button real quick, but I have something in particular I want to show now. But let me go in here and just do the button here. And I'll say class BG green 500 PX-2 PY-4. You can do rounded. There's a whole bunch of choices for how rounded you want the button. I'll just make it a little bit pronounced, XL. Oh, did you say you wanted a shadow? Okay, we have a bunch of shadows. It's going to be hard to see shadows, especially on a black background. But I'll throw it in there. Technically, you're not really going to see it, but it's in there. So just another idea of some of the things we can do and how we can spin up this button. What is that concern you said? You said, oh, I don't want to have to put these classes in on every single button. No problem. This is a very common thing. People look at Tailwind, oh, I don't want to copy and paste these classes all over the place. This is the part I was saying where you're not restricted. If I was restricted to HTML, I wouldn't be as much of a fan, because you mean every time I have a button, I got to copy and paste that over and over again? No, that's no good. I want to group these classes. Let's take care of that right now, because that is the one of the biggest sort of Tailwind bashes I've seen, and it's not accurate. Here's what I'm going to do. I'm copying these classes. I'm going to go into my CSS file. It's not going to be as bad as writing CSS, though. Almost, but not quite as bad. I'm going to use a special Tailwind directive layer, because what I want to do is I want to layer my own component right alongside all the built-in Tailwind components. So there's no fighting or anything. And I'm going to call this one a button component. So I just use a CSS class, just like I would in CSS. And here's the difference. I'm going to use @apply, paste those in. And now I can come over here and just use my custom class. And there it is. So you're still saving time, because you can just use the @apply directive, but now you can see how you can use Tailwind in a composable fashion. You can compose those utility classes into your own custom classes. So I wouldn't do that too often, because then you're almost getting to the point where you're just writing regular CSS, but still no semicolons. Well, one semicolon at the end, but you get the point. I'm not writing manual CSS, but I still have that benefit.
Yeah, and you still have the benefit as well of, in the HTML, you can scroll through the options and things like that, and then just go to your directive afterwards, which I think is very nice indeed.
Yeah, we can just put a class in it. I was going to do another one here. I find myself using this a lot. Like, it just seems like a lot of times on the mobile view, this is what I want. Flex column, and then a gap of 4 Tailwind units, which is really just 1 rem. That applies a row gap of 1 rem. So this is the other one I was going to do. I can just copy this. I can just cut these classes rather. I can come in here and I can drop this into, components again. I can just call it whatever I want. I can say my-call, not a great name, but kind of just proves the point of the customizability. There's that. And now I just go and use that class wherever I want, even though it doesn't really bother me to have a few extra classes in the HTML. HTML is already weird, all the quotations and attributes. So that doesn't bother me. What does bother me is if I have, for instance, multiple buttons and I would have to copy and paste every time. That's no good. That would be a deal breaker, except it's not. So
yeah.
You want me to? I'm happy to keep going, but I don't know how we're doing on the time.
I'm happy to if you're happy to, Manav.
Let's do it. Okay, so my call or whatever. And so I can, of course, go back here and I can apply my call. Just if somebody's particular and they're like, I don't like all these classes. Well, we're already reduced the classes. So you can compose your own classes. So we'll keep going a little bit more here. Call to action. Now I see I have a bunch of H2s in here. And I'm pretty much just going to say I want them all to look the same. So I'm not going to use classes. I'm going to go back to the CSS. But this isn't really a component. This is part of the base rule. It's just an H2 selector. So I'm going to say @layer base. Oops, I got a bracket in there. H2. Same thing. I can just, I do need these other braces. And then @apply. And then I can just say text white. Well, I think it's already text white, so I'll skip that one. But I do want to say like text XL, font bold. You can already see all of the other H2s are picking up on this. So I may or may not want these to be white, so I'm going to leave that alone. But again, I'm composing the Tailwind classes into my own styles. Let's hit tidy here. There we go. Just cleans it up with the formatting. All right, so that's one of the big things I wanted to show, because people do have that misconception. Again, the phrase I would use is full creative control. All right, so screen reader only. So this is looking. We can work on this input just a little bit, but there's nothing much new to show here. I'll just say class. In fact, now that I think about it, I have all these inputs down here. We're probably not going to get to those, but let's add some basic styling to these. Actually, why don't I take this opportunity to show a Tailwind sort of plugin. So let me go back to the docs here. If I look for plugins, there are a couple of official plugins. There's one specifically for typography. And all it does is it gives you some additional rules, additional classes that they don't usually include, that allow you to really have control. If you're really writing a textbook or something, you might want that. There is one for forms, and that way, because it's a double-edged sword. Yeah, it's nice that it strips away all of the styles for full customization, but maybe it can give me just a few nice default styles. And you can use the Tailwind Forms plugin to do that. So when you go to the link, ordinarily you would npm install it and just pop it into your config. So since I'm using the playground, I can just pop that into the config right now. We don't really need this. Well, I'll leave it in there just because we're not using it. But okay, so now as soon as I do that, You can see it, they're not great, but it gives me some basic styling, right? And then I can customize it from there. Okay. So there's that. So this is kind of fine. Maybe I don't know, padding's a little bit much, but it's fine. Better to have a little bit extra spacing than not enough. I would like to put some rounded corners on this. So I'm just going to do that right in here. So all of my inputs and the text area have rounded corners. I like rounded corners. So I'm going to go in here and say input text area. And then I'm just going to say apply, rounded, just the basic rounded corners. And that is, of course, just using a little bit of border radius. But if you look closely, though, you can see that the rounds are on here, but these don't look rounded. So this is a little bit of a gotcha. If I had to pick a con of Tailwind, maybe, I don't even know if it's a con. It's just that when you use the form plugin, this is as much as you're going to have to fight with Tailwind. Okay, so brace yourself. I'm just going to go in here and say I'm just going to say bracket type. If you're not familiar, this is not Tailwind. You can see the rounded is being applied. This is just a little bit more specific selector. It's called a CSS attribute selector. Again, it's not Tailwind, and it just means any input that has a type attribute. So you just have to be a little bit more specific on it to get the rounding to sort of override the forms plugin. Okay. So this is the extent of the fighting I've ever done with Tailwind.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, never have to do anything else. Let's set up these sections at least. What I'd like to do on these sections, you can see here, it's kind of like this alternating color. So again, I don't want to go into HTML and do all this manually. These are all very similar. So let's keep working on actually in the CSS side a little bit. I'm just going to give this a unique identifier, such as ID container section or something like that, whatever ID I want. And I'm going to think of that as a component. So this is what I'm going to do. I want to get this alternating color business. I want this alternating color. And you know what? I've never looked for it. There might even be a way to do that in Tailwind. I need to show you the pseudo classes also. After this, we want to make these buttons so they transition colors. We haven't shown that. That's a must see. Okay, but getting back to this, I'm going to say, what was that? Container section. That was my own made up name, container section. And I want to grab all of the sections in here. So this is just CSS. Again, if you know about, excuse me, the nth child selector, it might make sense when you see it in action. I'm going to say nth child odd, and then I'm going to say apply, and I'll say like BG, teal 500. So you can see what that does. It goes into my custom. This is regular CSS right now. The selector stuff is regular CSS. My ID, I grabbed my direct children, and then I said, I just want the odd children, like the first and third children, to have this background color. And then you can add some more stuff, and you can say, do just a little bit more here, but I got to show you that hover thing too. So container section. So I want all of the sections, all of the direct children sections. I want them all to have, let's say, the usual stuff, px-2, py-4. Maybe I want them to be, actually, I should be able to apply my custom class right here. There you go. So check this out. Even with the @apply directive, if I made a custom class, it's going to be able to use that, sprinkle that in. So you can compose and compose again if you want to, okay, as much as you want. Now, I'm going to make it clear, though, you don't really need to, if you're looking at this and you're like, I don't really get all the CSS, depending on where you are on your CSS journey, shall we say, again, to keep it simple, you can just come in here and not get fancy and just apply whatever classes you want and never look at CSS. It's that flexible. If you're comfortable with using some advanced selectors, you have a little bit more superpowers. If you just want to use the basic classes and get familiar with it, that's it. So like in the upcoming Tailwind Scrimba course, we just keep it pretty simple, and we just show different example, or I should say, I show the different examples of classes and stuff. So
I'm sure people will be very excited when that course drops.
yeah, exactly. We're finishing up here. Let me show you this hover thing. So I'm going to say hover. Is this the right one? Yeah. And you know what? I don't even have to put it. Since I already started making my class, let me just do this on my class. How do you do a hover state? You say hover colon, and then you can say, you know, BG green 700. So now when I hover over the button, but that's not very nice. It doesn't transition, does it? It's just like a snap. So let's apply a transition. And for optimization, we can specifically say we're only interested in transitioning the colors. And now when I hover over it, it has some it's a little bit smoother. And as always, I can be a little bit more fine-grained. Look up transitions, controlling transition properties. You can do your ease in, out. You can set your own delay, all kinds of things. There's well, that's with all of the other transitions. Let me see if I wanted to do like, let's look up animation. There's some built-in animations, but you have like some built-in like spinning and pings. But again, all of this stuff, if you want to do your own, how about a scale? Let's do a scale real quick. When I hover over this, I want this button to kind of scale up. So I'm going to say at hover scale 125. So when I, it's not at hover, sorry, just hover. And so you can see it's like really jumping around. So I'll take this transition and I'll just apply it to all the things, and it should be a little bit smoother. There, it's a little bit smoother now. It's not snapping. Let's tidy this up. So again, one of the original questions was, do you need to know CSS? You need to know some CSS. And if you do know some advanced CSS, you can do a lot more stuff. But again, I want to emphasize that all of those nice looking examples on the front here, they're not using any of this sort of intermediate stuff I'm showing. They're just dropping classes in here, and we can kind of start to read what these are overall. So let's look at this image one. Where's the image? The little circular right here, rounded full. So if I wanted to know what that did, I would just come in here and say, hey, I want this to be rounded full. Well, then it makes, you know, if you have a square, it turns into a circle. Actually, that's not bad. I kind of like that. So I'm going to do that. Yeah, that works there. And that way, see, this is another thing worth knowing. I have another submit button down here, and I'll give this a class of button. And now this is, well, of course, there's more work needs to be done in here, but this has the basics of the button styles, but this one is a full rounded button. So again, I'm not fighting anybody here except for the one thing with the input. So it's a totally different experience for the level of customization you can do, as opposed to some things that are more like full-blown frameworks. Again, those full-blown frameworks, I pop one class in and it magically does like 8 things and I'm done. So if you're in a rush, or you're just looking for, you know, just something quick and generic and not a lot of customization, then sure, reach for those. But this is a nice balance, I think, on all the fronts.
Definitely. I'm sold, as are many people in the chat.
Sure.
Yes. Tailwind is this easy? Never knew. Never bothered to know. Yes, indeed, it is. That's brilliant. Sign me up.
Covered most of the salient points. I mean, we can, you know, do any other custom questions or anything. Yeah, I'm taking requests, I guess. If we have time, I can try to do, you know, as long as
Well, one question is from Miguel. That's an answer. The question was from Bradley. When will the course be available? Miguel says you can find it on Scrimba. You can find a Tailwind course on Scrimba, but Manav is working on an updated one, which will be dropping hopefully soon. So
yeah, I'm gonna be safe and just say end of January, but I suspect we might even do like a release of like the first couple of modules, and then I'll add a little bit more to it. But just to be safe, you're on the live recording, I'm gonna say end of January.
That is very exciting indeed, and we will drop an announcement on the Scrimba dashboard when it goes live. So keep an eye on that. Debjit has a question. How can I use 2 different Google fonts in one page and another default fallback font to other pages? Oh, wow.
Okay, so you want to, okay, so Tailwind has, if we look up typography on here, show you what Tailwind's got going on. I think it's actually font family, or is it font style? Oh, no, that's for italics. Oh, yeah, you know, the only minor ding on Tailwind, I don't know what it is, but sometimes, like if I search for font family, now it came up. I swear just a minute ago it didn't come up. Once in a while, the search doesn't work that well. It works well like 90% of the time, but sometimes I'll have to go and look for it on the sidebar. Anyway, if we look in the fonts, it comes with 3 pre-packaged fonts, like there's regular sans, there's a collection of serif and mono, right? So if you wanted to add Google fonts, in fact, it might even talk about that here. Yeah, it's going to be the same thing, like customizing your theme. You can, you just work in the Tailwind config JS. You install your Google fonts. That's nothing to do with Tailwind. So by installing the Google fonts means you can go in there, you can use the @import, and you can, or they give you like the little links, right, to their CSS on the CDN. So whatever it is, you get the Google fonts in your project. In fact, here, we can take a quick look at it. I don't know how well it'll work in the, I go to Google Fonts and just look up something here. They kind of changed this around. I'm not even sure. Let's see. What if I just search for like the Oswald font? Okay. There's this one. Okay. Well, this kind of gives, okay, I'm not sure. So I'm not sure how we get to it right now on the Google font. That's Tailwind's problem. It's Google fonts, but you get them installed, and then the end result is in your customization. You would just go in your Tailwind config, and you would say, you know, my custom font, and you would just drop the name of the font in here, and then you're free to use it. You just add the class, my custom font, and then you're good to go. So to answer that question, there you go. You have multiple pages, no problem. Just drop that class that you just created in the config that's associated with the Google fonts and use that when you want, and don't use it when you don't want it. So no problem.
Brilliant.
Yeah, the difficult part is apparently finding the fonts on the Google Fonts website. I don't know.
Yeah, I noticed that as well recently. They've changed it and it's not where it used to be. And I had to poke around for a while. One other question, if you have time, Manav.
Yeah.
Is I've been doing the free React course on Scrimba. Shout out. And I'm planning to go all in on Tailwind. Does it play nice with React though?
Absolutely. Okay, so 2 things. Well, actually, let me show you this here. I'm not 100% sure how, like, I did do the Bob's React course, or one of the versions of it, back in 2019. So another shout out for Scrimba. My first foray into React was on Scrimba, actually, when I was just getting into React, and also same thing with Vue. So I'm not only am I a Scrimba instructor, I'm also a former student. Anyway, getting into the React thing, let me show you on the getting started part. We didn't look at this part. Framework guides, here you go. Whatever you're using, it's probably on here. So if you're using, say, okay, I don't personally use Create React App anymore, but I know a lot of people, especially if you're just kind of getting started with the basics, it's a great way to go. So again, I can't 100. Maybe we can check with Bob on how that would work on Scrimba, if it would. But Create React App, and here you go. You just do your thing, install it, update this. That's it. That's how you pop it in. And then, yeah, I can show you. Let me just go on my GitHub really quickly. And I mean, it's nothing really to show. Like, let's see, I have this little silly demo project I did a while ago. But if I look at some component in here, so source, yeah, components. Let's look at the select. And yeah, you're going to see, well, not an, okay. Oh, here we go. Okay, I didn't use much in here, but here's an SR only. So, I mean, it's, yeah, so it works the same. It plays nicely with Tailwind. Of course, in React, it plays nicely with React. Of course, you're going to say class name instead of class. So not a problem. integrates right in, and you're good to go. So that, in fact, I think
Brilliant
on
news.
here, yeah, so you can see right here on my, in an app CSS, all I did was drop these at Tailwinds, and I'm good to go. All the components can use Tailwind classes, pretty much like you saw me do in the demo. No problem.
Super cool. And one question we have here is, do you animate on Tailwind? Yes, you can. And there's even built-in animations already there for you. You can also make your own. So I think this is great, actually, because a lot of people dread writing CSS, let's face it. So you don't have to, pretty much. But if you want to add some of your own, you've definitely got the option, as Manav said.
Yeah, absolutely. So they show an example in here. So this is, just a partial example, but if you have some type of an SVG or whatever you want to animate, yeah, you can, for instance, just say animate dash spin and pop these. Like this is, we didn't look at this. This is height and width classes. So let's look at width really quickly. So you have all these choices, and you go down to the bottom. You have stuff like full screen, which is 100 VW, min content, whatever you want in here. So that's why I said it helps to know the basics of CSS, because you do have to have some clue as to what you're looking for. It just saves you the trouble of writing it manually. But I actually learned CS. I didn't know about the scroll snap business. I haven't played with it much, but they have this these CSS scroll snap types. I don't really know much about it, but evidently if you have these horizontal things and you let go, it snaps it to where you want. So this is apparently some new UI trend that I'm not familiar with.
Oh, yeah.
So for instance, so I even learned some, I was like, what the heck is that? So I just look at this once in a while. I never used that CSS before. So it's both ways. It can help you learn CSS at the same time. So yeah, typically if I'm teaching like a formal class or something like in person somewhere, we'll spend a little bit of time on CSS. Once they know the basics, we just Tailwind all the way through, and there's so much less distraction with fighting with CSS, and we can focus on React or whatever we need.
Yeah. And I spoke to our designer Roku on this live stream recently, and he actually uses the Tailwind docs when he's not even coding. He just uses it to search for color palettes and things, because he just finds it really handy. So yes.
Tailwind. Yeah, they actually, so the creators of Tailwind, one of them is a full-time UI person, and so they have this, Steve Schroger. I haven't looked at this book. I guess I probably will just get it just to support Tailwind. But yeah, this is, I hear a lot of great things for like people that are developers that want to be better designers, but don't really want to learn design. This is I hear a lot of good things about this book. So, I mean, fortunately these days people just tell me the design and I just do it. So I don't have to think about it. But yeah, if you are like more of a freelance or something, that might be a good one. I should mention Tailwind is of course totally free. If you really get into it and, use it like as a freelancer or something, they do have for purchase, which, I use it a few times, but typically I like to just do it my own way for teaching. But they have like a bunch of pre-built components set up for React, Vue over 500 components. So this is a paid thing, but once you get the basics, they give you some like super components, so you don't always have to do it on your own. So
that's really nice. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. It's like, and it's a great, I mean, everybody's budget is a little bit different, but it's $300 and it's lifetime, one time. Use it for unlimited. So if you're a freelancer, I mean, $300 is, that's hopefully not even one project or something. So
yeah, well worth it. Man, Mika is looking forward to your course, Manav.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm glad to hear it. Yeah, especially when we get feedback like that, it's kind of makes, I got to make sure I crank this out and not.
Yeah. So. Well, Michael says Manav is a great instructor and developer. So there's some inspiration. Yes. Thank you for your time today, Manav. Yeah, really appreciate it. It was great to have you. It's the end of the year. You know what that means? It's time almost for our JavaScriptmas grand finale. It's on a Saturday this year. Yes, because it's on December 24th. So I hope you can come along, and watch us wearing our Santa hats and having lots of JavaScriptmas fun. If you have no idea what I'm talking about, JavaScriptmas is our yearly code advent calendar, and there's still, well, if you include today, 4 more challenges you can complete to enter. Lifetime Scrimba Pro and $1,000. There you go.
Wow, I had no
You
idea
can win.
about that. So
Yeah, and there's other chances to win if you do code reviews. So yes, hit it up. Well, thanks once again for coming, Manav.
yeah.
Really nice demo. And yes, my opinion of Tailwind is just getting higher and higher the more I see of it.
I'm glad I've done my job then. Yes.
Absolutely. Yeah. Enjoy the rest of your day. And thanks again for coming.
Thank you. All right. Appreciate the time, and we'll talk to you. Bye-bye.
Absolutely. Bye for now.